Hey y'all, this is Blazing Diamond Rose. It's been a minute since my last video, but this is a continuation of my last videos. Generation Revelation Part 5. And I believe in my last video I went over, I was speaking directly about what it talks about in 2 Timothy 3 about demonic spirits worming their way into homes of gullible, in particular in the passage it talks about gullible women loaded down with sins, loaded down with sexual sins, loaded down with shame and guilt. And then it talks about all these all these characteristics of perilous times, of people will be lovers of themselves, people will be blasphemous, people will be envious and traitorous, all that stuff. So in this video, I've went over this before in different videos, but in this video I wanted to specifically really go into detail, I think in a more concise, somewhat updated way of how I was my research in the Word and God's Word in the Bible, and then different experiences, and then different that I've been going through, and different experiences I've read about fellow targeted individuals, persecuted Christians. But again, I encourage you to do your own research, take time in your own prayer and your own studies and your own conversations with God directly, seeking his guidance to guide you in his word, seeking his guidance to guide you in discernment. So you're not just reading his word, you're not just taking it at face value, but you're understanding it in all aspects of the way he wants you, or would want you to understand it and apply it to your own individual life and experiences. And with that, it's called Facets of Hazing and Grooming. It's a little bit meaty, but again, I know a lot of this stuff I went over before, but in particular things I will go in more detail, just more concise about some specific things I've noticed. And I don't like, added on and whatnot. Facets of hazing and grooming. But first of all, I wanted to read from, I wanted to read from Isaiah 11. And why I wanted to read from Isaiah 11 in particular was, again, what it says in that God calls us out of the world. And that is in John 15:19. There's several different parallels to that, but it says it calls us out of the world, and that if we were of the world, we would be loved by the world, right? If we were of the world, we would be loved by the world. In 1 Corinthians 3, Apostle Paul's identifying the characteristics of those who still live in a worldly mind state. Right, as it talks about also in James 3:16, they're caught up in a mentality of carnality, of sinful lust, of envy, of hostility, of hunger, of greed, of rivalry, of deception. All the stuff that it talks about, of essential and demonic nature that it talks about in James 3:16, that is distinctive from the heavenly nature, or from the nature that God has given us through Jesus Christ, through his example. And what we're trying, and ongoing, trying to manifest in our own character and our own lives. So why I bring that up is when we are confronted, or when these things are thrown at us side, when we got different stuff coming at us sideways, these intrusive thoughts, these street theaters, or seeming street theaters that, it seems like we're looked at as we're crazy for pointing them things out, if we're the only one that knows them, like we're in some Twilight Zone episode or Outer Limits or Black Mirror episode every day, and like we're the only one that noticed it, but yet we're not. It's just supposedly some sort of mass psychosis epidemic, but it's not necessarily all the way. But yet, the distinguishment of what it says, when recognizing when you're still in that mind state, or when you're in that realm of those things are in your surroundings, whether you're awake or whether you're asleep, distinguishments to pull you back to the Lord, who is supposed to be our anchor and our hope. We can't be anchored in this world, but what anchors us to Jesus, what anchors us to God, what anchors us to heaven is his word, and the reality and the sharpness of his word, his living word, his living and active word. It's not dead faith, right? It's not dead works, right? It's not dead thoughts. It's not dead intentions, right? It's not of a carnal nature. It's not based in the sensuality of the flesh. It's not based on things just pressing our buttons, right? Or random desires or random whimful things entering our mind, or things we're curious about on our own. It's not based on that. It's based on discipline, control, maturity, growing up, right? Constantly seeking to improve ourselves and discipline ourselves and grow up in the faith by constantly trying to be more outgoing, more outgoing in what we do for others, more in service of what we seek to do for others, wanting to treat others how we want to be treated, how God calls us through Jesus to help others. So where it's not about just self-preservation, but coming together as a family, helping people, trying to help people as you can help them, as they're receptive to you, as you're receptive to them, right? The way Jesus did, he didn't go around begging people for attention, right? He didn't go around throwing himself at people, right? And he didn't just oblige just anyone, right? He helped people who he could help that were receptive, even when it seemed like those people would, like what he talks about in the city of Chorazin and Bethesda, where these people will be considered, he called them worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, where they had experienced his miracles, his living miracles, yet after he left them, they turned around and went back to their old ways. They turned around and went back to unbelief and sin. And so he said in his return, it would be worse for them than Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So in Isaiah 11, it talks about the distinguishment of what it's going to be like when Jesus fully returns in his presence and manifests his kingdom, when everything is final, said and done, when we're walking around as family, as a heaven, or in our full heavenly manifested, redeemed, sanctified nature, with our ancestors, with our people, fully in present time, all on the same level, all on the same ground, all on the same cloud, but not in some convoluted, demented, perverted way, but all on a level with the Lord, right? And it talks about that. Let me go to that right quick. Just wanted to read that right quick from verse 1 to verse 10. Oh, actually, from verse 1. I'll read the whole thing, actually. Now, I'll read from verse 1 and verse 10. Yeah, but I do encourage y'all to read about from verse 11. Read the rest of it. Verse 11. So verse 16, when it talks about the restored remnant. Right? You know, it's all about the remnant. Again, what this video is about, a continuation about trying to hone in and focus on preserving our remnant people, our faith, our mustard seeds, right? Our children, our future generations, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, our unborn, due to be born, right? And those who have already been born, right? So that we don't become apostates, right? We just fall in a swirl, right? As if we didn't already come out of that. But in Isaiah 11, right? Righteous reign of the branch. Then a shoot, the Messiah, will spring from the stock of Jesse, David's father. And a branch from his roots will bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding. The Spirit of counsel and strength. The Spirit of knowledge and the reverential and obedient fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. And he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make decisions by what his ears hear. Right? I just want to stop for a moment and think about that when we're in this world, when we're still in the world, when we're still worldly, as Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3, right? As it talks about in James 3:16, right? As it talks about in 2 Thessalonians 2:9 and verse 10, where it talks about the Antichrist, who will be revealed at some point, right? Is given an unlimited arsenal of deception. Unlimited arsenal of deception and seduction, right? To persuade those who are willing, as it talks about in Daniel 11, to violate the covenant, to go against God, right? Who are caught up in sensuality in their senses, on what they see and what they hear, right? And what they taste, all you gotta do is press buttons. All you gotta do is do some David Copperfield stuff or some circus stuff in their eyes, and then their eyes go here, and there, and they just believe everything or question everything. Right? They don't go to God. Right? But it says that this particular person, the reign of the righteous branch, he will delight in the fear of the Lord, right? He won't be going to mediums, right? He won't be trying to use sorcery or cards, right? He won't be trying to use the tarot, right? He won't be trying to conjure the dead, right? Or just, be limited to the advice or counsel of, priests or pastors or himself, right? He'll be going to God in prayer, right? He'll be going to God in prayer. He'll be going in his inner room. She'll be going in her inner room, right? They'll seek to consult the Lord, right? As it talks about in Hebrews 12, verse 22 to 23, or 22 to 25, right? And in verse 26, it talks about that God will shake not only the earth, but the heavens, right? So everything's going to get shook up. Everything's going to get a sifting, right? That includes heaven, right? That includes earth. That includes anything in between, right? And he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make decisions by what his ears hear, but with righteousness and justice he will judge the poor, right? And decide with fairness for the downtrodden of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. So in verse 4 it says he will use righteousness and justice to judge the poor, right, and decide with fairness. So he'll be using his counsel, his heavenly counsel that's already been redeemed, right? He'll be using his son, Jesus Christ, right? He'll be using those who've been marked and saved for salvation, as it talks about in Ezekiel 9:4, right? And in Revelations, what Revelations is it? Is it 7:3 or 7:4? Revelation 7:3 and 7:4, right? And righteousness will be the belt around his loins, and faithfulness the belt around his waist. But this is the real kicker, right? And the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatted steer together, and a little child will lead them. And the cow and the bear will graze together. Their young will lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the nursing child will safely play over the hole of the cobra. And the weaned child, not some child still on the breast, but a weaned child, one that's been weaned from that, is matured from that, will put his hand on the viper's den and not be hurt. They will not hurt or destroy and all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Then in that day, the nations will make supplications to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. Notice it says the root of Jesse. It doesn't say Jesse, it says the root of Jesse. Right? So again, we're talking about the redeemed. We're talking about Christ. We're talking about when he raises us up in his return for his salvation. Right? The remnant. Right? The generation of now. Right? So I wanted to go ahead and get into my video, but I encourage y'all to read that and focus on that. Now, there's a lot of pseudo stuff that obviously can occur in dreams, that can occur in reality when we just caught up watching movies or fantasizing, having daydreams, or we're actually having terrors or whatnot, and making things more than what they are, exaggerating or demeaning things, belittling things, making them smaller than what they are. But this is talking about in the context of an infernality. You know, when the Lord is present, fully present and manifested with us as his people as a whole, when there's nothing but the redeemed left. There's no lion, there's no predator, right? There's no, as it talks about in Revelations 7:16, there's no death, there's no hunger, there's no thirst. There's no carnality, no carnal desire. There's no need for hunting. There's no need for rivalry. There's no contention. There's no war. There's no squabbing, right? We're at one as a whole, as a family at that time, as we should be. We're not there now, right? But that's when we know, right? We're at that place at that time, right? We're still in the birth pains, right? We're still in the birth pains right now. We're still in the rumbling, right? Whereas it was, let's get ready to rumble, right? We're still in the rumbling, right? We're not at that spot yet, right? So again, we'll always know that something, some sort of spiritual, demonic spiritual entity is trying to draw you in a place that's unholy, unrighteous. It doesn't match up with that. It doesn't line up with that. It doesn't point to that, right? It points to a worldly swirl, a nature that's constantly going down, right? It's constantly decaying. It's self-destructing. It's on that path. It's on a constant path of self-destruction, ever worsening, as it talks about when it says, evil men and imposters will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Now, this is not just talking about men. It's talking about all people, because these spirits can take male, female, young, and old forms. They could take dead forms. They can take living forms. All right. So, imposters, right? But we will know if we're still in a worldly state. But then at the same time, we're still in a worldly state. We still in a place of grace, as it talks about in Romans 11:13, right? And then it talks about in Romans 5, verse 8, where wherever sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. There's no place where there's sin running amok where God doesn't have sovereignty or isn't over it, or doesn't have intercessors already there, activated or latent, right? Ready to charge at his charge, ready to charge at his command, right? But we're still in the fiery trials, right? We're still waiting to be baptized, right? We're still trying to walk through that fire, right? Without burning, right? Without being like the fiery bush, not being consumed, right? But being on fire for the Lord. So let me go ahead and get into this. Some of the stuff, like I said, I'm just going to skim over. I went over before, but other stuff I will try to go into more detail about. Facets of hazing and grooming: psychological, thoughts and dreams, biological, physical, health, intimate relationships, family relationships, friends, old friends, acquaintances, social networking, work environments, right? Work mobbing, right? Everyday errands and street theater. You go into the store, you go in the laundry room, right? Transmutation, projection, regurgitation, right? Let's talk about intrusive thoughts, right? And images and sounds. Purpose of them, right? Shaming, false shaming, implicit racism, right? What God says, your thoughts are not my thoughts, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. It's talking about God, right? His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His thoughts are not carnal ever, right? His thoughts are higher. His ways, his agenda, his motivations, right? His plans, right? He's always ahead, right? He's always ahead, and it's like you can't limit him, you can't corner him, right? He can go back, he can go forward, up, down, but he's not a board, right? Where these things try to implant false memories, mess with our heads, right? Through thoughts and sensations, thought implantation, suggestion, implicit racism, right? So like I said, some of the stuff I went through already, but there's already information out there where there's information about things manipulating us biologically, messing with our reproductive system or our intestinal system, how we digest our food, obviously messing with our heart, our brain, our limbs, right? Our sexual organs and stuff like that. Then there's messing with our psychological, messing with our memory and our perception, how we perceive things, how we process information, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations. If they, again, it's about the media. Whoever can manipulate the media, manipulate your feed, then they have control or seem to have control over your mind. If they can control all that, then they can dictate you, right? They can robotize you, right? They can make you more like a puppet, right? If they can do that, if they're able to do that. But yet, it's only through deception, right? And through your consent It's through deception and through consent. It's never actually direct, and it's never completely locked down to where God can't pull you out of that, where God can't reverse that through Jesus, through your crying out in despair, right? Through your questioning, like all of a sudden realizing this doesn't make sense. He can put a schism in you to where these things can never anchor down in you, which is again why they're always trying to bombard us. The nature of these spirits are constantly trying to bombard to kind of condition, because they don't have a firm hold. They're not God, right? It's not natural. It's not based on love. It's not based on life. It's self-destructive, right? So they can't anchor down, right? So they constantly need to try to pull you down, to try to hold you down, but they don't have no real anchor, right? Your anchor is your own will. Your anchor is your own will and commitment and desire, right? With the Lord, right? In agreement with the Lord, or whatever else tries to anchor you down or hold you down, right? If you're not anchored to it, if you're not in agreement to it, there's always going to be a schism. There's always going to be a fight. There's always going to be a tug of war until that's eliminated or resolved, right? But anyway, 2 Timothy 3, right? These things have no fear. Now, this is one thing I really wanted to go over, because I've really noticed this. It's like no matter how positive I try to be and focused, these things seem so relentless, so unending. You know, just trying to get my attention, so negative, so ruthless, and incendiary, right? and trying to make me feel so negative and more bitter than what I am. It's like I am not that up and down. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that extreme from one to another without some sort of catalyst, something trying to push me or trigger me that way. I don't just go that way, right? And so it's always by something trying to push me, and just consider that, right? Again, buttons, right? These things have absolutely, it talks about an enemy spirit. Enemy spirits like that in the Bible were the Amalek people, right? The Jezebel spirit and the Herod spirit, the King Herod spirit. So just, you could do your research on that. I'm not going to go on into that right now. But, you know, they weren't into idolatry. Now, the Amalekites, whatever, then they were actually relatives, distant relatives. But they just had a very vicious, seemed to have some real vicious grudge. They were supposed to be descendants of Esau. It says they were blood lickers, right? They were into blood, right? Actually consuming blood, right? So they were vicious on multiple levels, and they were completely ruthless, and they had no fear of God, right? And you'll notice that when these things seem relentless, constantly messing with you, they don't have no fear of nothing. They seem like they absolutely have no fear of nothing. They don't care. Especially if they see themselves as already dead and sinners. They see like they can't be any worse if they're already worse, right? So, but think about that and the irony of that. They're trying to make you, or these things try to make you feel or think that way, right? And now that backfires, right? It says, but they have no fear, no reverence, and no love for God. So absolutely, they have no fear and no love for you, right? So their nature, they just simply get off. They're sadistic. That's just their characteristic, a key characteristic of their nature and their personality of these things. And again, we war not against flesh and blood. They're spirits, right? Their behaviors, their characters, their attitudes, right? That can influence us if we allow it, right? Cruel, sadistic bouts for attention. They're constantly vying for your attention, right? Some type of way, or trying to isolate you trying to make you crave them. There's a verse in the Bible. I'm gonna find it right quick, where it says they want you to be jealous of them. Well, that's not exactly it, but let me find it, right? Oh yes, it's Galatians 4:17, right? Galatians 4 is the same chapter where it's talking about the prisoners, right, and then the heirs, right, and the or the slaves, right? They supposedly live in some slave house, but they're actually the heirs, even though they might be children at in the aspect and seem like slaves. They're no different from slaves. They're actually the owners of the whole establishment, right? And then in verse 7 it says that they've been adopted. They're no longer slaves, right? They've been adopted to God the Father, right? He hasn't given them a spirit of slavery. They've been reborn, adopted, renewed, right? In his perfect timing when he brought his son Jesus Christ, right? But anyway, it says, those people are zealous for you, but not in a good way. Instead, they want to isolate you from us so that you may be zealous for them. Nevertheless, it is good to be zealous if it serves a noble purpose at any time, and not only when I am with you. Now, in verse 16, it says, this Apostle Paul is talking about, have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? Now, what he's talking about is exposing the sham, right? Exposing the shame, despising the shame, right? Warning his people about these people that are trying to exploit them and manipulate them, right? And trying to help them and encourage them to seek the Lord, right? But these people are angry, they're hostile, right? They have animosity toward him, like, who does he think he is, right? But he goes into detail, says these people are zealous for you, right? It's like a clique mentality. These people seem super zealous. They go out their way to, try to be in the midst of them, help them, but they really just want to exploit them. They're like people who just want to be close to some business or some mom and pop so they can actually eventually take over the company, take over the business, right? Shut them down, right? Get the mom and pop to sign it over to them, or just give it up, or somebody dies in the family, right? Even if they gotta orchestrate some murder, right? Like what King Ahab and Queen Jezebel did with Naboth's vineyard, right? She orchestrated. His land, his vineyard was ancestral. It was never supposed to be sold or traded, but she plotted and planned for him to be murdered by incriminating him, falsely incriminating him, incriminating her husband or whatever, and falsely said that he signed over some stuff that he didn't sign over. Some stuff with that. I'll read it. You can read about that in Judges. Where does that say that? Anyway, I'll leave that in the verse, whatever. But anyway, and she orchestrated him to be murdered, right? And stole his land, right? Stole his land, got him to falsely sign over his land, and he never did that. And then had him murdered, right? So it's just like they tried to be close to him, act like they was going to, be bosom buddy. But when they didn't conform to him, they did whatever they could to have him eliminated and killed and took over what they wanted. It's kind of like what King Herod did to his wife Miriam, right? He wanted to get in with her family, right? He supposedly loved her, but yet his lust for power was greater, to where he ended up killing her and their sons. Also, all for the desire of hoping to maintain his reign, right? And then he ended up marrying his niece, right? And some other stuff later on down the line. And that same niece is the one that seduced him into beheading John the Baptist, right? So anyway, and so it's that mentality, all right. Somehow they have some insane lust and some insane animosity, some insane hostility on a spiritual nature, to where what was he? He was intimidated by babies, so that he had babies massacred, thousands of them, right? Because he wasn't even Christian, right? Because of the prophecy about Jesus, right? But yet he was so scared and apprehensive about feeling threatened that someone was going to take over his throne, that he killed all these thousands of babies. Now, that wouldn't be humanly normal, right? That would be demonic, right? That wouldn't be humanly normal. No human would no human in a rational, normal, atheist mind would be like, whatever, so what, right? But he had some other stuff going on with him where he was actually fearful and scared, right? And so it's like demons channeling through these people is what I'm saying, right? With their own demonic agendas, right? With their own demonic agendas and fears, trying to manipulate people to do their works, right? Because in the demonic form, in the demonic form, they have to, when the Lord orders them or commands them to do something, they have to do it even though they're still demons, right? As we saw with Jesus when he commanded them to leave the boys or the females or whatever that were possessed, right? On different occasions, you would think they're demons. One, they try to fight with Jesus or something, be like, no, I'm not going to do that. But when he told them to get out of them, they had to get out, right? But so that goes back to what the other video where I was emphasizing these things aren't after Jesus. They're after his descendants. They're after his remnant. They're after his brethren, right? They're after his remnant. They're not after Jesus. They're trying to make him obsolete by trying to come for us. They're after his Easter eggs, in a sense, in a way, right? So again, that's how you notice that's how you distinguish these things. Truly distinguish them. They have no fear, no reverence, no love whatsoever for God or you, right? They absolutely don't care, and then no gloat and boast about that, right? Completely ruthless, sadistic, right? Sadistic is the key characteristic, right? So they're not just bad and sinners, they're sadistic, right? They truly get off on trying to hurt you or come at you, and they're relentless. They don't just stop. They don't take breaks. They're kind of like the Terminator, right? In a movie where they don't ever take breaks. They just seem like nothing throws them back until Jesus will come, right? They're just going to keep coming at you and keep coming at you till they can't come at you no more, till they're not allowed to come at you, right? And then it's about how will we stand for ourselves? How will we resist these things, right? Because they act like they have no fear, absolutely none, no reverence. Right? So they don't even act like Satan necessarily. when Satan was trying to challenge Jesus on the church, right? Yeah, just imagine that. Like, how can you act worse than Satan? Not like the heck, man. But I mean, cruel, sadistic bouts for attention, right? Territorial, operates in droves, control and domination for your own personal preferences. I'm just like, they truly, these things are truly obsessive on how they try to contradict our every thought or preference to try to, like what I was reading about in this video, Academy of Ideas, where it talks about brainwashing, how they was able to, these different military groups were able to brainwash POWs for a time by getting them to turn against what they love or hate what they love. They start siding with the enemy. It's like, what was that called? Stockholm syndrome. Right? The things that were beating the hell out of them, torture them, they start acting like they in love with them and stuff. And yet they hate it. All of a sudden they hate their own country and don't want to go back to their own countries. They start saying all type of hateful stuff and thinking all type of hateful stuff toward where they should want to return to and go back to and be rescued from. right? Another telltale sign of trauma, but also defense mechanisms, right? So it still doesn't mean that these people are just, if you see that or notice that you're struggling that with yourself or with family members or friends, it doesn't mean they're lost. It means they're at war, right? It doesn't mean they're lost, right? It means they're at war. They're being taken captive, but yet they're not captives, right? They need to be reminded of their salvation, of their freedom, right? Of their faith, of the love, of the hold that God has on reality, right? Right? So, what was it? Religion, family, romance, social, individual, specific obsession and mockery of the word of God. And that's another thing. They particularly, it's like I really noticed in my text how really, when I really think about it, the different type of avatars, whether they be celebrity avatars, people, images of people I've worked with or family members, right? Or just random strange people. The scenarios, right? The different scenarios and in reality, in actual reality, the different things that seem to channel. And remember, I'm talking about channeling because it's a spirit, right? They're not actual people. They're channeled through certain people's behaviors or gestures at certain times, the timing on it, right? It's really in a mockery of God's word, right? Like imagining someone doing something sexual and you want to stick their finger here and there. And then think about what Jesus had told Thomas to do, who Thomas was, known for his doubts, known for doubting, right? He needs to see and feel things before he can believe it, right? Now think about that. If you undergo a lot of sexual terrors and fake dreams and stuff like that. And they may not feel or see anything, but they're all pseudo. It's no different from where you have an arm cut off. Well, maybe that's not the same thing, but but kind of like you can have an amputee arm, or you have some placebo pill that tries to make you feel like you're supposed to feel someone's working when it's not. It could just be sugar, right? Or it could just be empty air. It's not actual or monoxide. It's not actual oxygen or whatever, right? And then you don't realize that till you coughing up a storm and your head is just excruciating pain, like it's about to just pop out your skull, right? I'm like, something's off here. I can't see it, right? But what I'm saying is how they manipulate and mock the word with their attacks and their skits. And then that's aggravating, but then at the same time it's a relief, because again you realize what they're really attacking at the core, or what they're really challenging you or gauging you at, and where your faith is, and how much you know about your God, how much you know about God's word, how much you trust his word, where you recognize these things that should be obvious to us but are subliminal. But they want to be subliminal if you're looking for God. If you're looking for the confirmation of his word, you'll start to notice, like, hold up. They was mocking the Lord right there. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that was a mockery of the word. Oh, that's his whole situation, the scenario. And you'll be like, oh, you'll be upset, but yet relieved, and you can go back to the Lord and recognize again that it's not playing victim and seeing victim, but seeing your victory in the midst of the challenge or the gauge, right? The humbling nature of it to remind you that, this isn't for nothing. And how people, where it says even the elite can be deceived. Even the elect, if possible, even the elect can be deceived, but only if God allows it. And why will he allow it? If we turn away from him, if we continually reject him, if we're not seeking him, if we're not consoling with him, right? We're not consulting him. We're being like Saul, consulting with witches, right? We're consulting we're playing cards and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Instead of praying to the Lord, right? We're consulting some person that makes our ears itch. We just going by what they say or what they do, but we're not talking to the Lord ourselves, right? That's how you get all these mad cults, right? And then they love to put Jesus' name on them, right? Wear his shirts, have their name, and their organization is all about adultery or rape or molestation or prostitution or some other sexual stuff, right? And what it says in the Bible, it says all sins are outside the body except sexual sins. Sexual sins are when you're actually sinning against your own body. I think about that too, right? And that the Lord will never intentionally, he will never join his church, never join his bride, never join his people with a prostitute, right? With an institution of prostitution. That's not what he's about, right? He will be turning over those tables. He will be trying to save those doves from being desecrated, right? Classic telltale signs of channeling, right? Influences of the enemy, attacks, emphasize facets of carnality and sensuality, strife, contention, lust, infatuation, idolatry, confusion, humiliation. All they loved constantly. It was like I was saying, if it's not you, if they're trying to make you look out like you're just a viewer of this scenario or whatever, they're trying to humiliate you and hurt you through messing with something you love or care about, right? Or they're trying to make you feel interactive or involved or imagine you're involved by using some sort of actor, right? And what I mean by actor, any demons are actors themselves, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it's anything other than you or what's familiar to you, right? So because when it's familiar to you, it draws you in, right? Automatically draws you in. But sometimes they don't do that because the more they mess with you, the more and the mature you get by praying and seeking the Lord, the more you become aware and you know what to avoid and immediately reject and dismiss. But if they use strangers, throw strangers in every now and then that you're not familiar with, you'll wonder, you'll question, you'll want to know more instead of, again, immediately rejecting and dismissing and going to God, right? Attacks emphasize facets of carnality and sensuality, strife, contention, lust, infatuation, idolatry, confusion, humiliation, desecration, strangers, cliques, cult infestation, click triggers, argumentative, inflammatory baiting, direct and subliminal sadistic marketing, false flattery, or when they all have that hive mind, but yet they're only projecting what they want people to hear. So, like, you only hear the demons. For some reason, they hear the demons. The stuff that they're trying to project in your brain, but they don't actually hear your heart. Or you only hear them or see what these things want you to see. Right? It's like when you're dreaming or trying to sleep, it seems like I said before, like it's their whole show. They run everything. And then when you're awake, they try to act the same way, damn near. Right? You're like, hold up. Why does this scenario seem so familiar, so rehearsed? Where did I just see this before? Right? That's when you know they're all part of that same channeling or that same scenario. They're all in that mind state. Right? And you got to pull yourself out of it. Right? Because, that's when they think they have you meshed with them. Right? And you're like, no. God dang it. Condescending, patronizing, like I said earlier, Herod and Jezebel spirits, caste mentality. Now remember, these are the hotbed characteristics of these type of grooming and hazing tactics, right? Condescending, patronizing, Herod and Jezebel spirits, caste mentality, right? Versus Christians, Antichrist believers, all who support or have fallen apostate are captured by the Antichrist agenda. Examples will be like 50 Shades of Grey or 50 Shades Grayer. Notice they used the leading character's name was Christian, right? And that wasn't just supposed to be subliminal, right? And it used on purpose to grab your attention when there's nothing Christian about it, right? Beast of no nation, right? I already had these children. They don't felt like they had no land, no homeland, no inheritance, right? But they're just an army of them, right? Being pointed here or there, just being led. It's like just being puppeteered by adults, right? Hunger Games, already know about that, right? Sausage Party, that was supposed to be some sort of adult cartoon, right? Whereas target audience was obviously adults, right? With multiple sexual connotations to it. False and staged forced synchronicity. Now, as I said, forced. They really have to try to force themselves to be in sync with you because they're trying to break up. They study us to see how we try to encourage encourage ourselves in the Lord and what's good and what's right, and how we try to resist them. So they're constantly trying to shake us up, right? And that first has to act like they're with us, right? And then once they act like they're with us, try to switch up on us, right? So false and stage forced synchronicity, right? Going in and out or arriving here and there or speaking when you're about to speak, moving, but just like really, who has that time and energy? People don't. People do not. People don't have that interest either. They don't care. They want to live their own lives. That's not normal, right? So again, when you be feeling all hostile, angry, remember, they're trying to channel through people, just the same way they're trying to channel through you, right? But it doesn't always seem obvious all the time. Sometimes it seems like you're the only one on your show, and it's not your show, right? A false and staged synchronicity with trigger words, phrases, and gestures in mockery, intimidate, isolate, or gauge. Consistent schismatic flares. This is what I want you to know. Consistent, regardless of all that, right? Notice that if you have any consistent schismatic flares revealing true enmity, distinctive of the nature of God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Hebrews 12, humanity versus fallen angels, demons and demons. Hebrews 1:7, Job 1:7, animals, James 3. And James 3 is talking about all animals have been tamed except the human tongue, right? Exodus 32 is talking about, how the people revolted against Moses because they act like he was taking too long up on the mountain getting the commandments. And then they convinced his brother Aaron to build them a golden calf, right? And then they turned around and worshiped the calf and threw a celebration and became debaucherous, had huge orgies and was getting drunk. And then God told him to go down and handle that, right? He went down and destroyed the golden calf, made it into powder, made them drink it. And then he told the priest, whoever was truly going to be on God's side or wanted to repent from that, to take up their sword and go back and forth, eliminating, fighting against anyone who wanted to remain in that pagan mind state, right? So the priest took out 3,000 of the people, right? And so, the ones that remained, they still had to go through much more trials after that. That was just the beginning because God was still infuriated. He wanted to just take them out, but Moses had interceded for them, right? Escalades 3, where it talks about who knows where the spirit of the animal or the spirit of the human goes, whether they go up to heaven or they go somewhere downward, right? Ezekiel 14, right? It's talking about idolatrous leaders or elders, right? Who lead people into sin. You know what I'm saying? Like apostate leaders or people who try to take advantage of the congregation. You know, like they might be sleeping with the women or sleeping with the man, molesting the boys, or having adulterous affairs with the women, or some sort of stuff, or trying to cater their word or their sermons to their own interests, their own personalities, where they just get people become these big money eating churches instead of nonprofit churches, right? They're based more on profit than they're based on missions, right? Individual people, it talks about in James 1 and 3, where it's talking about, where it makes it clear that God does not tempt anyone, right? Nor can he be tempted, right? So when we're trying to seek his spirit and be in his character, we have a resistance and we have a level of discernment, right? Galatians 5, where it talks about all the different characteristics of the flesh, the actions of the flesh that are sinful and carnal, and the difference between that and the nature of the spirit, which is, it says the fruit of the spirit is love, self-control, right? Kindness, right? 1 Corinthians 3, where it talks about, I was talking about earlier, where it identifies what the worldly mind state is, right? And yet, we'll be going through the fire, and whoever tries to build, no one can lay a foundation other than Christ. So no matter what anyone tries to establish, they can't supersede the Lord, right? You can't supplant Jesus, right? How, for example, Jacob tricked his brother Esau into selling his birthright for a bowl of red lentil stew. You can't do that with Jesus. You know what I'm saying? You can't trick him out his birthright. What he's done is already done, right? And then let alone, you can't come after his descendants and try to do the same thing, because what he did for all time. So all we have to do is recalibrate ourselves and return to the Lord in prayer and faith and sincerity and spirit and truth, right? Ourselves, right? There's nobody can curse us or sabotage us or become a block. No one can do more than what he already did. No one can change they can't void him out. So that's what it was talking about in 1 Corinthians 3, right? We belong to Christ and Christ belongs to God. Can't no one replace him. There's no replacement for him, right? Deuteronomy 13, it talks about anything and everything that tries to counsel us against God. And again, that's multiple forms. That's whether it's in the media, that's whether it's in the physical realm, that's whether it's in the spiritual or physical. Anything that tries to counsel us against God, against his word, against his truth, against our salvation or redemption, we should be already able to recognize those things. Those are like dreamers. It says in Deuteronomy 13:3, and he calls us not to listen to him, right? He allows these things to come against us, but he calls us not to listen to them, to be discerning, right? To recognize them for what they are, right? They're like gauges. They're like challenges. They're like hecklers. Like if you got somebody on the stage and you got people talking and crap, or like if you have some people trolling your Facebook or your Instagram page or whatever. They ain't saying nothing positive, just negative stuff just to get attention, draw attention themselves. Or not even that. They try and put some clickbait ads up on your stuff. They just posting comments to draw attention somewhere else. Right? They ain't have nothing relevant to what you are about. Right? It's kind of like what these Deuteronomy 13 about these things who are trying to counsel you against the Lord, his spirit, counsel you all discernment, right? Counsel you or convince you or persuade you in some type of way on some bull crap, right? Passive aggressive, subliminal, and scapegoating, right? Or they want to make out like everything is about this or everything is about that, right? And everything is about the devil, or everything is about racism, or everything is about do, right? But it doesn't line up with the Lord. doesn't line up what he says about our own nature, our own frailties, our own choices, right? Our own need and call for discipline, our own journeys, right? It's just all about scapegoating and trying to put someone off on something else, or not looking at the whole thing, right? Not looking at the whole scenario that God offers us through his son, right? That God offers us through him being on the cross for us, right? That God offers us through him resurrecting from the tomb, right? And telling Peter to feed his sheep, right? And that when he ascended into heaven, that it said that he will return the same way he left, right? And somehow we just disregard all that, right? So again, passive-aggressive, subliminal scapegoating, defense mechanism. There's no scapegoating. We can't throw on someone else what more than Jesus already took on. We're just throwing it on celestial beings. We're throwing it on our angels, which is like shadow boxing. But there's still going to be a reckoning for all that, right? When we do that purposely, intentionally. Like, it's kind of like that dude in Dorian Gray thinking he can put everything on his picture. And it's the same way if these demons, these demonic entities, try to put everything on us, try to use us as mascots and destroy us, and yet that's against our nature. Those aren't things that we're not actually living these ways. We're not actually living out these narratives, these demonic, vile, perverted, vicious damn narratives, right? We're not living that out, but they're hoping to just destroy the image that we are, destroy the image of God, destroy and contaminate and take over our bloodlines, right? Just by mere suggestion, but just by mere CGI or whatnot, or whatever, right? Just by mere memes, right? Just by somebody trying to make you out more than what it is, drawing attention to you that you wouldn't normally have, right? Or trying to diminish you some type of way, right? And passive-aggressive, subliminal scapegoating, defense mechanisms, and self-preservation, right? Joining the herd against the black sheep. And that's another thing where I talked about this before, when you start to see or start to realize these things are really getting to you or getting to your family members. You might start feeling like, dang, these really things are trying to get you to join with them. I might as well just join with them instead of deal with the heartache or the stress or just the aggravation, right? Or you start to see these things with your family members where it seems like they chime in with these things, are influenced by them, no matter what you try to do, right? They seem influenced by them, or are they channeling these things? But even regardless of that, recognize it for what it is. It's not beyond God. It's not unknown to God, right? And it's against their nature. You know how they are. You know their beginning. You don't know their end, but you know their beginning. But if you trust the Lord, you trust that he will bring their end up, because what it said he's the beginning and the end. He's the author and the finisher. So ultimately, he has to say so. Nothing of this world ultimately has a say so on you. That's why it's constantly spinning and trying to bombard, because it has to constantly try to stay in the midst and trying to change things up at whim if it can, right? But it doesn't have a say so. It doesn't have a determination the way God has. If God wants to end something and continue it somewhere else, right? As we have a higher calling, right? So just think about that in a sense of the boy and the girl, and the boy in Mark 9, right? The girl in Luke, Luke 8, Lazarus in John 11, right? Where he's calling these people up and out, where they seem like, or in the dude in Mark 5, where he was possessed with all these multitudes of demons. Anyway, right? No one is beyond what it said in Mark 9:23. It said the father had said was caught up in unbelief, and Jesus was like, all who believe and trust in him, right? It will be. Let me go to that right quick. Yeah, well, the father was desperate and he was hurting. He wanted his son to be saved. His son was just like a little preteen or whatever, but he had been thrown in fire and water since he was a little boy. These demonic spirits had been, trying to occupy him, but yet they couldn't kill his body and his spirit. So it was constant war. It was constant battle. Right? They couldn't just kill him. They couldn't just slam him against the wall and for some reason he'd just be dead. They couldn't just throw him in the fire or just drown him and he'd just be dead for some reason, right? His spirit was at war, right? Not just his body. Right? But yet it seemed like the demons had control over him. But, so he was coming at Jesus for help, right? And Jesus was like, if I can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And then Jesus says, if you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes and trusts in him. Right? So trusting in him is trusting that the Father is in him. No, so it's not just trusting in him. Like, remember, and why I say that is because I take in the context what he said before when someone tried to call him good. And he rebuked them, talk about, why do you call me good? Call no one good but God the Father. No one is good but God the Father. So I'm like, so it's not just talking about, and then what it said in Matthew 19:26, he said, all things are possible with the Father, with God the Father, right? With God, right? He said, with man, it's impossible. With the Father, it's possible. All things are possible, right? So talking about trusting in his character, the righteousness of his nature, if he's acting in obedience and love, right? There's no obedience without love, right? Acting in loving obedience with his Father, then he's exuding, he's exemplifying, he's magnifying, he's manifesting, he's exalting, he's praising, right? And seeking praise for that nature, that characteristic, right? So everything is possible for those who believe and trust in him because of the Father. And because of what he's doing in obedience to the Father, right? So I'm going to try to tie this up. I know it's long. On Matthew 11:21 too. Anyway. Passive-aggressive, subliminal, scapegoating, defense mechanism, self-preservation, joining a herd against the black sheep. Clusters always trying to reel bait you by conditioned negative stimuli. Keyword stimuli, by conditioned negative stimuli. And any negative, we're talking about anything that takes you off the path that you're trying to be on with the Lord. The path that you're trying to be on with yourself, especially if that's of abstinence, especially if that's of meditation. You know what I'm saying? Like you're fasting and praying. You're not trying to be in the world. You're not trying to be fiending like you some druggie, some addict for this or this or this or that, right? You're trying to discipline yourself so that it's harder for these things to push your buttons and steer you this way or that way just by aggravating you or enticing you, right? Or seducing you, however you want to look at it. Seduce, aggravate, whatever. Emotions, right? Sensory buttons, emoticons, right? They just choose an emoticon to mess with you and you're just ready to go, right? Clusters always trying to reel and bait you by conditioned negative stimuli or aversions. Space crowding, hovering, or manipulating children or family to provoke and incite you. Now, that's one thing. If they know they can't get to you, again, they'll try to use something close to you, channel through that. Now, again, you recognize that it's not intentional all the time. You might not recognize that in a moment you get aggravated, but see it for what it is so that you don't take out your anger, right, and spaz off how these things want us to play out, right? See it for what it is. Recognize it for what it is in the spirit, right? Because when you start assigning these things, when these things manage to deceive us into assigning these characteristics, these identities on our loved ones and just on anybody, right? Then what? Again, we're playing into their hand, right? And just corroborating on our own self-destruction, right? As if there's no hope, as if there's no redemption. That's if we don't already have what we have, right? As if we've been drawn down in the dumps and beyond that, right? Clusters always trying to bait you by conditioned negative stimuli or versions, space crowding, hovering, or manipulating children or family to provoke and incite you. Recognize the scenarios, right? Skits, whatever, and stonewash. And what I mean by stonewash, try your best not to be cold or whatever in a moment to your loved ones, but I mean recognize what things want to cut it off, right? Cut the connection off. See it for what it is. Don't feed into it. Don't respond to it. Right? And give it to the Lord. Pray about it. Right? You might not be able to talk about it with them because they might be unaware. Or they may be aware, but they think they're right. Or they think they're helping you. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you handle it. Right? And that you handle it in an appropriate way the best you can, regardless whether they agree with it or not. And by appropriate means giving it to God, praying about it, and trying to monitor, self-control your actions to where you're not spazzing out. Right? You're not playing into the dynamic, the narrative that they have in those situations, the tragedy that they want to orchestrate, right? Even if it's on a grand scheme, it may not be obvious all the time. They'd be like, oh, hold up. I see where they was trying to go with that Othello type stuff, or that Hamlet type stuff, right? Or that much ado about nothing stuff, right? Demonic spiritual entities need hosts, conduits, and carnal sinful attitudes to feed, brood negative energy to transmute. Then key word again, right? It's transmute. Not transform, transmute, transfer. Just keep passing it like it's a hot potato. Keep passing the blunt or whatever, or the cigarette around, or the drink around, whatever. Or the so-called body around, like you some dang rag. they just want to pass around, be used. Some train to just get on, right? Right? They don't want to transform, they want to transmute and transfer. Disconnect from that. Be adamant, and Christ will reroute them or you, right? As I was talking about in Mark 9 and Matthew 11:21, right? And when it's talking about reroute them, it's talking about he will drive these spirits out. He will help you drive these spirits out, and drive them out is by these things will want to leave and flee you. And if they refuse, if they're in your body, right? Because they don't have anything adamant to feed on. So therefore, they try to attack everything around you. You'll notice that as well, right? They're still trying to attack you, but they realize that's more difficult. So they'll try to attack whatever they can around you, right? Now, if they're, or in some circumstances, he'll drive you away from them. Right? And where it's not always these things that gotta leave. Sometimes it's you gotta leave the situation. Right? You gotta walk away from the situation. Right? It's as much as it depends on you. Right? It's kind of like when Jesus was in the wilderness. And it wasn't like Jesus was a demon. But he already knew he was a prime target. The prime target. And these things were all going to come for him. And he went into the wilderness knowing that these things were going to come at him. But the wilderness is already known for trial and discipline and reckoning and all that. So these things who had to starve. He made them starve. He didn't feed them. The devil came at him directly, right? So it was the devil, but they had other demons messing with him too. They just didn't mention that, right? But because they operate in clusters, right? But the thing was, the devil was more obvious, but he didn't follow his commands. The devil wasn't able to command him. The devil was not able to command him. He didn't follow his orders. He didn't recognize him as authority, as something he needed to follow. Right? He recognized his intentions, right? His motivations, right? And he came at him, and that's how he responded to him, right? He recognized his intentions, right? Not just his actions, right? His intentions and his actions, and he refused to comply. Now, he did respond to him, but he didn't respond to him in obedience, because that's not something he needed to obey, right? And so, therefore, the devil had to flee from him because he didn't have nothing to feed on. Jesus wasn't giving him food, right? And Jesus wasn't trying to feed on him, right? So he had to leave and try to come at him a different way, right? So it says, leave room for Christ, right? Take nothing for your journey. Luke 9, verses 3 through 4. Luke 22:38, John 11:6, John 11:18, Matthew 5:41-44, where it talks about go the second mile, right? When someone wants to smack you or sue you or whatever, give them your other cheek and give them your coat too. Go the second mile with them. Stand firm in your faith under condemnation, right? I'm not going to go on into these verses, but Jeremiah 12:20 and 31. Jeremiah 12 is talking about how he's going to uproot his people, how he's going to let his people be attacked, but yet he's going to save them, right? Uproot them, then return them to their land, right? Jeremiah 20 is talking about where he felt like giving up on sharing the word, right? Because he kept being under attack, and it was becoming unbearable for him, where he had wanted to die. These people kept attacking everything about him, and then he was asking God to punish these people, and God wouldn't seem to punish them or whatever. So he was frustrated. So he had thought that if he just shut up for a while and just hold it all in and just try to get by day by day, that it will all go away. But God wouldn't let him do that, right? So he caused a fire in his chest, right? And he lit up, and he realized he couldn't hold the Lord in, right? And Jeremiah 31 is talking about how God will will allow Israel to be attacked or whatever. Well, he will be the main one wounding them and striking them like an enemy, but it'll be for their own discipline. Then it'll seem like they're hopeless. There's some sort of lost cause, right? And uncurable. They have some sort of uncurable disease that they're just at the bottom of the bucket or whatever. But when everyone says they're forsaken and they seem forsaken and lost, then he will restore them and renew them, and he completely heal them like no one else can, right? Because he loves them. Micah 3:4-7. Right? I'm not going to go on to that. But 2 Thessalonians 2 is talking about the Antichrist. And again, what I was saying earlier, the delusions and wonders and deceptions he's allowed to perform, the seductions he's allowed to try to propagate, right? Ezekiel 13:14, right? It's talking about the false elders and the false prophets, right? And Matthew 24 and 26, Matthew 24 is talking about where if possible even the elect will be deceived when all the stones will be unturned. And 26 is talking about the where Jesus was asking the people when did they see him naked or thirsty or hungry, and whatever they did for him, whatever they did for the least of people, they did for him. And Luke 3, 4 and 15. And 3 is talking about, how Jesus will baptize with the Holy Spirit and the fire. Luke 4 is talking about setting free the captives when Jesus goes into the temple. Luke 15 is talking about the prodigal son and the lost coin and the lost sheep. Mark 9 is about fasting and praying and the boy that was saved, that Jesus saved from the demons. Hurry up. Matthew, hold up. Yeah, Hebrews 10, 11, and 12. Y'all can read that. Romans 12, 13, 1 Corinthians 10, James 1, 1 Peter 4, and Jude 1 is talking about the dreamers and, defiling their own bodies. And they put so much faith in their dreams and their sensual dreams, right? And they use their dreams to validate defying reality and authority and people in the real world, right? They just want to sleep and dream, right? Beware of imposters seeking to sink. Beware of imposters seeking to sink, merge, and make you obsolete or suppressed. Gemini, twinning, cloning, image, imagine, shadow boxing. And basically, shadow boxing. Using your image, using spirits, using your fantasies and your imagination to shadow box with you. Right? To shadow you. To shadow box with you. Right? To beat the air, but yet they're not beating you. They're not touching you. Right? It's all pseudo, right? But again, if they're able to draw you into that, they can possibly trap you in the mind, right? Channeling, right? Glitching dead, unredeemed spirits and entities, kind of like what, again, whether they try to use, and when I say channeling dead, unredeemed spirits, people who are living and loving and preferring the life of sin, or people who've died, sorcery, people who have died unsaved, unrepentant, literally died in their sins. They didn't return to God before they died. They didn't seek him, right? So they literally died in their sins. So these things are trying to channel those spirits, and it's like a gamut. It's like running amok if they're able to deceive us and captivate us through curiosity, right? Our own sinful nature, or through deception and fear, right? So it's like, but if there's fluctuations, again, it indicates an internal war. So these things don't have constant control, right? Like if you see little twitches, they're like, when you see one person acting that seems unterroristic, and then the next day they seem normal, or the next moment or next hour. It's like these things can go in and out or fluctuate. But again, it's an indication. It's actually a good sign. It's an indication of eternal war. And again, that we should pray that there's a schism there that God has placed. There's an anchor there. There's a battle there. There's a war there. There's a divide within them, right? These things are bidding for their soul, right? But the soul is not compliant with it, right? The individual soul is not even compliant with it, right? The fluctuations indicate eternal war. God can use the Holy Spirit to quicken and supersede, anchoring and exercising his word, physical, spiritual event through sleep, memory, sensory triggers, carnal thoughts, desires, or experiences, whether traumatic, placebo, or pleasurable, right? So these things try to operate through the physical and the spiritual. But God, again, can supersede that and is able to supersede that and has. Consider Hebrews 7:25 and Daniel 7:25, right? And Hebrews 7:25 is talking about our advocate, Christ. He always lives to intercede for us to the uttermost. All his children, he's able to save them, right? But think of Daniel 7:25 like these people who are trying to perpetuate this ideology of some Mandela effect where they can just change time or psych people, they can gaslight people, right? And think if something happened or didn't happen or whatever, right? Mess with their heads. The presence and effect of the true Christ and finality upon his return with a new heaven on earth. There's no carnality, no predators, greed, lust, envy, jealousy. No competition of blood sports, no hatred, hunger, thirst, pain, worry, deception, right? That is Isaiah 35, verse 9, Isaiah 11, verse 1 through 10, Revelation 7:16, and Revelations 21, 1 through 4. Until then, we are in the world, but not of the world, kind of like a dream in dreams or a game in a game, or a Rubik's Cube. Think of that Hellraiser, but no, we don't want Hellraiser, right? Escalades 1:9, John 13:3 talks about Jesus knows that everything has been given to him, right? And he's on his way returning to the Father, right? He's already with the Father. Everything has been given to him. Take that in consideration again when these things try to claim or make claims that they're taking things from you, or if you've given something up that doesn't belong to that doesn't even ultimately belong to you, but belongs to the Lord, right? So they can't take it from God, then they can't take it from you if your faith is in him, right? Ultimately, right? You have ultimate redemption. You have ultimate, you can reclaim it. Nothing can be, your pasture land, your feeding ground, your nourishment can't be bought or sold or traded, right? It's perpetually yours, permanently yours, because it belongs to God, right? And you belong to him, right? False contractions, 2 Thessalonians 2, Malachi 3:10, Joel 3:16. I'm going to finish it up right there. Right? And Joel 3:16, it says, the Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. And the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. God is able through Christ to save to the uttermost, right? Where's his war cry? Where's his battle cry, right? To the uttermost. God is able through Christ to save all of his children. Romans 5:18, Psalm 118, verse 23, verse 22. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and that is Christ, the head of the church, the preeminent one, the forever one. God bless.